What's up, guys? Welcome back to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Digital World Acquisition Corp, ticker symbol DWAC, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, February 9th. Well, Digital World Acquisition, DWAC stock, finishing the day today up about 2 points a share. We're heading into that $50 a share region, up 4.43%. Let's take a look at this thing here today. So what I want to do first is zoom in here on the 1 minute. Take a look at this little rejection setup that formed. This channel tightened down a little too much. It began to tighten down aggressively. And then, of course, we pushed upside through that 2 standard deviation volume weighted average price band. You know, this started as a setup that I was paying attention to, but, you know, with sometimes the spread on DWAC, and then the tightening down of that channel wasn't one that I ended up looking at seriously. If you guys want to get my personal intraday scalp setup alerts, take a look at that first link in the pinned comment. You could also, upgrade to get swing trade setup alerts as well. Human verified unusual options activity to potentially see. I've been tracking that for years, and I use it personally to get an additional factor on a specific name if I see one come through that truly is unusual. But also, it's very interesting in the sense that a lot of times something comes through that's so unusual that it seems as if somebody somewhere might know something. Okay. Or you can also look to get a Platinum one-on-one membership if you're looking for more of a hands-on experience with me. Again, the price does go up over time, but you get grandfathered in. You will stay at the rate that you join at for as long as you retain that membership, and I hope to see you join. But let's now take a look at the 5-minute chart and take a look at some volume here, okay, and try to get a good idea. Again, the stock's up a little bit after hours, but, again, take this with a grain of salt because volume is so low, okay? Now, if we look at the actual intraday and we get a gauge of, okay, where'd the moves happen? We saw this big push up toward 49.50 kind of midday, and then we saw this slow fade for a lot of the back half of today's trading day. You can see here that we actually got a volume pop into that push, and then volume faded pretty quickly as that stopped, and then this fade was very, very low volume the majority of the day here today. So listen, to be completely fair, not a lot to take away from the we're watching this every day, okay, but not a lot to take away from the 5-minute here, so we better move on, okay? Here's the 30-minute. All right, let's get a more contextual view of our day-to-day self-fulfilling prophecy, ever so important levels that I think everyone should be watching here. Remember, we're always looking at a variety of time frames, trying to see as many things that potentially line up as possible. So here specifically on the 30-minute, we saw here today, this 50 period was acting as a bit of a support level. Currently, with the current positioning of the stock, it's about a 5.5% downside move to make a retest of that. So here's what I'm looking for. From a bullish perspective, I want to see this thing rip upside as quickly as possible to get, like I typically say, get some feet up underneath that move, a psychological potential safety net, right? But if we do end up seeing a back test of that 50 period, I want to see that hold as support. Now, you bears, looking here at the 30-minute chart. By the way, we have big levels to look at, but I want to look at those when we get to the daily. You bears at the 30-minute. 2 things. I would want to see that 50 period staying as low as possible, letting the stock kind of flow down thin air, so to speak, as much as possible. Give a reason for that thing to potentially pull back due to psychology of that happening. And then ideally, you'd want to see this break downside below that white line, that 50 period, open up a potential downside move toward that 200 period. Okay, let's move on now to the 4-hour chart here. You can see, we zoom in a little bit more and get a little bit more contextual here. That 4-hour 50 period is sitting right at about 41.20. So that is approximately a 16.2% downside move away. Not immediately relevant. I mean, listen, I'm paying attention to it because DWAC is a very volatile name. But I mean, listen, to be honest with you, I'm looking much more at huge psychological levels. So let's move on to the daily. Okay, paying attention to the 4-hour if it comes into play, not completely ignoring it, but we got to wait for it to come into play. Looking here on the daily chart, we'll zoom in to get as contextual as possible. Listen, $50 a share is still the huge level. If I'm a bull, Okay, I mean, the stock was up 2 points today. We have to talk about 50 because it's, you know, it's just over 2 points away at this point. Okay. Well, and this is the daily chart, right? So it's actually the closing price. So it's like a point, a little more than a point away if you want to include after hours, which of course is the real price. So we have to. Again, if I'm a bull looking at this, okay, $50 a share, break and hold, ideally backtest, claim as support, and rip up out of that hole. That is my ideal scenario as a bull. From there, I'm happy. Okay, if it continues to rip upside, great. If it trades sideways above 50, great, equally great, you know. But if I'm a bear, this is a lot more simple. Do not give up 50. 50 is such a huge psychological level. Fade as hard as possible off 50. Okay, and on the daily, that's pretty much all I'm looking at. You have this 50-day here, $25 a share. You have the 200-day down at $17.30. Guys, these are going to take time to catch up. We've had such a monster move in DWAC so far. These are going to take their time. Okay, implied volatility. Let's just zoom out and get a more contextual view here of IV. You can see here that it is sitting a little bit higher. So understand that if you've owned options for more than a few weeks, you've likely experienced some IV pump. Okay, it's not the highest it's been, but it's currently at about 160 in the 160% range, 163%. So new options buyers, just understand that if we do see a fade in IV, you likely will experience a little bit of IV crush. Not to say that you will lose money necessarily, but that Vega factor pricing into your options would take a negative hit if IV fell substantially from here. If it rose substantially from here, that would benefit your contracts through that one factor Vega. Now let's take a look at the bias here today in the options chain. Again, DWAC is typically going to see a bit of a smaller sample size. So while we have to take this with a grain of salt, the bias is so ridiculous that we also need to look at it, okay? Just under 69,000 total contracts traded today. 55,000 of those were calls. 13,400 were puts. Okay, that is, I mean, listen, take with a grain of salt. You could have had one massive call buyer come in and throw that off because the sample size is low, but that is an absurd bias here, an absurd weighting to the call side. Now, the short-term speculators at 0 to 20 delta, those short-dated typically out of the money calls and puts, 21,000 calls in that range, 8,400 puts in that range. So in the short-term bias, the short-term speculators, we're also seeing bullish bias. In the mid to longer term, those in the money and deep in the money contracts, that 61 to 80 delta range and the 81 to 100 delta range. Look at this, 61 to 80, 2,500 calls, 166 puts. 81 to 100, those deep in the money contracts, 10,500 calls, 3 puts. Not 3,000 puts, 3 puts. Okay, absurd. Listen, as always, number one around here, make sure your risk is managed. Always, it is not worth not managing your risk. If you have value out of this video, again, please subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 1,000 subs in the next 2 weeks, and with your help, I think we can hit that. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.